So, Mark, welcome to the Science of Sports. It's always good to have somebody that's been at the very coal face of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. For yourself, both as an Olympian yourself, as a top class track and marathon athlete, and to talk to you probably specifically today about the training of your athletes ahead of the Paris Olympics as part of our Olympic build-up. And I mean, I know that you're probably a little bit tired because you've just come back from the American trials. How did it go for you and your athletes there?
Well, first, thanks for having me on your podcast. I really enjoy it, and I've been listening to it for a few years now, especially through COVID and stuff. Kept me sane, I think. But
And
yeah, I
us.
just
Thanks.
yeah, and I just got back last night from Eugene, Oregon. So the trials was like a 10-day meet, spread over like 12 days or something like that. And for me personally, it's the most exhausting 2 weeks that I go through every 4 years, either as a competitor or as a coach, because as you guys know, track and field, it's a big deal at the Olympics, or athletics is a big deal at the Olympics, but it's not such a big deal the rest of the time. So there's a lot of pressure on the American athletes to try to do their best and come in top three, because it's really cutthroat. It's cutthroat out there. It's top three or sit at home, and you don't go to Paris even if you're number one in the world, as we saw in the women's 800 meters.
Indeed.
I mean, what's interesting, I mean, quite nice that they brought that up because it's obviously something we want to talk to you a little bit about. That system with the American trials where it's top three or bust. It's obviously some athletes that are potential medalists get left out of the American team because of that. Is it something that you agree with as a coach and as somebody that's very close to the athletes in terms of the way they do that, or do you think the American system has its problems?
I would say I'm like 90% happy with the way it is right now, or content with the way it is now, because like in the like I'm just gonna pick the women's 1500. There's probably 6 or 7 Americans that belong in the Olympics, and it would be really hard to choose which one should go through politics. And so I feel like in that sense it's great, but then like say in the women's 800 meters where a thing Mo fell down, whereas we probably don't have more than 3 or 4 people in that event right now that can get a medal or be making the finals, that maybe she should. So 90% of the time I'm like, yes, this is the fairest way to do it, but once in a while, like what happened in 800, I almost feel like we should have like the British process, the first two across the line and one discretionary pick. But I wouldn't change it. I definitely wouldn't change it. It's not fair. We have 300 million Americans. I don't know how many run, but it's a pretty big country, and it's definitely the fairest way to do it, I think.
Yeah, because the thing is, the 10% of the time that it doesn't work unravels the 90% of the time that it does if you allow it to be introduced, right? Because how would you then decide on that one? It's easy sometimes when you say, I think Mo's the one. But how do you apply that same rationale to the 1500, like the event you've just given, right? So
Yeah.
you either take all the good with the bad, or you take none of the good in order to accommodate the occasional bad.
Yeah, because like I was reading some of the stuff on the discourse, about the Kenyans picking their marathon team for
Yeah.
Paris, and about Kipchoge, should he get picked? I know he has a world record and he's won a couple of golds, but he's not running as well as he used to be running. And I was like, God, should they pick him or not? And in my head, I didn't chime in because I didn't. I just a little, I don't know, I just didn't chime in. I didn't want to get picked on or something, but I was thinking in my head, maybe I would not pick him this time, just because there might be another young Kenyan coming up that could be, the next world record holder. Well, I guess he doesn't have the world record anymore, but could be the next, great. And we just took away one of his opportunities to run in the Olympics, and now that person's going to have to wait another 4 years. So like a trial system might have been better for the Kenyan athletes this year. I'm not sure, but it's just something to think about, or it's great conversation, right?
How did you feel about it when you were trying to qualify yourself? Because you did finish in the top three in two US Olympic trials in the marathon, and the marathon is especially challenging, right? Because as you know, better than we do, like so many things can go wrong on one day. It'd be quite tempting for a marathon runner to say, I'd rather be picked on the body of work that I've delivered in 18 months, 24 months. I don't want it to all go down into 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I never would have got picked. I was running well. Like the year before I made the team in '96, I ran in the world champs and Gothenburg in the 5K the year before. So I was kind of rolling, so I knew I had a chance. But if it was just a bunch of old guys in suits picking the team, they would never pick me for 96 because like in the 96 trials, we had some great runners. Mark Platjes, who you guys know, South African, one of my best buddies. I mean, he won the world champs in Stuttgart a couple years before that. Arturo Barrios was an American then. He just lost the world record for 10K the year before and ran 2:08:42 or something like that in Boston the year before. You know, and there were a bunch of like 2:10, 2:12 types, and my PB was 2:13 from the Pan American Games, so there was no chance. But in my like in my head, in my heart, I knew I had a chance to run with these guys because I was training in Boulder with them, and sometimes they couldn't keep up with me in hard sessions, or or on long runs. I was doing everything that they were doing. So like in my heart, I knew that I belonged, and if I ran smart and didn't do anything stupid during the race, and didn't get sick, did nutrition right, did fluids right, more fueling than anything I think in the marathon, but and it worked out well. So the system worked great for Mark Coogan. Yeah. So
I suppose there's always that is the flip side of that coin, right?
Well, I mean, the question is, and I know it sounds like an overly harsh question, but in that situation, when you were going to Olympics, knowing that you probably weren't ideally the top one of the top three Americans on basis of form, did you not feel like an imposter to some extent? That well, I got in here because I had a bit of luck on the day.
Well, it's not luck,
but it's not luck.
Not
I mean,
luck. You delivered it. You delivered it when you had
yes,
to.
absolutely,
That's the difference,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, I didn't feel like an imposter. I felt like Superman that day. So, but some of the guys left home, I felt terrible about, So, and like when we did pick the team in 96, the trials were in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it was a really hilly, tough course. But it was also like 30 degrees and windy. And I'm kind of a big guy from the Northeast who likes cold and lousy conditions. Whereas in Atlanta, it was going to be a hilly course and it's going to be hot and humid as heck. So like, I don't know, like if they took science in, they might have like picked the skinniest, littlest, best person they could find, and actually like I was listening to your podcast, I don't know when it was, a few weeks ago or maybe a month ago, and you guys were talking about it because I'm not going to butcher his name, but Deguane won the race and he's tiny compared to me. And I forget who won the women's race now off the top of my head, but she was tiny too. And then like a few years ago, Boston had this really cold, crappy, miserable, freezing day, and like the two biggest elite marathoners in the race won. The guy from Japan won the race, and he has tree trunk legs like Rob D. Costello, just a massive person. And then the American woman that won. God, my God, I have Alzheimer's. I can't think of her name now, and I'm friends with it.
Was that the one? Is that the one Des Linden won?
Yeah, Des won. Sorry.
That's right,
Des. Yeah, Des won it, and she's not a petite little marathoner. She's a strong, muscular, athletic woman, and I think that the environment helped pick those two winners, as well as in Atlanta. I think the environment also helped pick the winners a little bit too.
For sure. Yeah. I remember you could look at did this after the fact, not at the time. I was 15, so I don't know any better. But after the fact, if you looked at the weight of all the runners in Atlanta and you ranked them smallest to largest, three of the lightest four got medals.
Yeah.
And I think we ended up doing the same in Athens 2004. It was the same situation. And that was the one where Radcliffe was injured and she was coming back from a stress fracture and so on. And everyone said, does she have a chance? It's like, even if she's healthy, she's got to compete against these smaller than her women. So you could have done the same exercise there and you would have arrived at the same conclusion and almost ranked the medals by inverse relationship with size, So it's absolutely right.
It's incredible when you think about it.
Yeah. It shows you how, I guess, when you're choosing it, when you're choosing the athletes that you're most likely to push for an event or like an Olympic Games or World Championships, do you look at the potential course and go, okay, well, this athlete is probably more likely to do well in these conditions, therefore I've got a better chance of getting that athlete through to an Olympic team based on their physiology rather than just their pure ability?
I think in the perfect world, that's what you would do. But since the Olympics are once every 4 years, and for Americans, we're top three off the trials, and making the teams it's a huge deal, such a big deal that I wouldn't do it, but in the perfect world, yeah, I would. I would say, like, if I had a person that's really runs well at the 10K and the marathon, say I had a 27-minute 10K kid and a 2:06 marathoner, and I knew it was going to be, tough conditions like in Paris, I might encourage him to, move towards the 10 if I felt like he could have a better performance in the 10 than the marathon. But
Mm.
the way the system's set up, I might even take 2 shots, run the marathon trials, the U.S. trials in February or whenever they are, and then come back and do the U.S. trials and the track trials in June.
Yeah, I mean, last word maybe on the system and looking back before we look forward is the one thing you will say about the US trials is that it tests whether you have the ability to deliver on the day when it matters. And then that's useful because that's what you're going to be asked to do in Paris.
Exactly.
So you design a system that says like, this is a dress rehearsal. Okay, the top three of you, you've shown that you have that capability, and it's harsh towards Mo because it's a 4, but actually, you've got to navigate the same thing in the Olympic trials as you're going to have to navigate in the main show. So if you
Yeah.
can't do it in the rehearsal, then maybe you don't deserve to be there. So everyone who goes is there on form. It's the form that
Yeah.
matters, right?
But probably
Yeah.
the only countries that can do that are the countries that have this sort of abundance of talent, because we couldn't do that, for instance, in South Africa, because we've only got a handful of athletes that are competitive. So if we had a 1500-meter athlete, if you had a guy like Wade van Niekerk, who decides that, on the day of our trials, he's injured or has a bad day or has a cold, you would not take him based on the fact that on that day, because we don't have anybody else that's going to be competitive.
Yeah, but if you know the game and you wait for Nikak and you can't come top 3 in South Africa, you probably shouldn't be in the Olympics.
Yeah.
So that's the
Good
counterpoint, I
point.
suppose.
Yeah.
Whereas in the US, like, I mean, there'll be loads of athletes.
Yeah.
Christian Coleman, 4th and 4th.
Unbelievable.
Ouch, painful.
Very
And
painful.
he's a middle hope, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And like one of the, before we move forward, like one thing that I was thinking about in Eugene, because I had Ellie St. Pierre on my team. She ran the 15 and the 5, and she had to run 2 5s and then 3 15s, and she made the team in both. And then I was thinking, like, what did Faith Kipyegon have to do at the Kenya trials? I know she had a run, but it was 1 5 and 1 1500, and so maybe like the US should, cut it back to like a regular US championships and make it a 4-day meet instead of, stringing it out for 10 days. Maybe Ellie only has to run 1 5K to prove she's top 3 in the US, because the pressure's still going to be the same, right? And then, and not 3 1500s, maybe just one final. Because like I felt like Ellie was in like 354, 353 shape possibly if she was running behind somebody that was really strong. But in the trials, Ellie doesn't have the best kick in the world, but she can run fast. So like she had to lead the whole thing, and she actually led the second round of the 15 too. So he was kind of running the finals of the 15 on dead legs. And I think running 355 is pretty impressive, for your 5th race in like 9 or 10 days, and leading it from start to finish. And like she's an animal, and now I hopefully like we can recover properly, before we go to Paris. Like we came back down to sea level. Like we train a lot at up in Flagstaff, but we just decided to come back home and like try to recover at sea level. And like sometimes like when we're in Flagstaff and we race hard and we come back to Flagstaff, like if we go to Eugene and come back to Flagstaff, it seems like it takes 10 days or something to feel good again. Whereas if we're doing a race in Boston and go to New York and come back to Boston, we feel like we recover in like 3 or 4 days. So I don't know what the deal is with that, but it's hard to bounce back when you're going back up to Flagstaff and 7,000 feet. I don't know if it's the altitude or distant family and friends. Or
definitely. Yeah. I mean, I've even said in the context of the Tour de France, if there's a mountaintop finish in the Tour de France and your team gets allocated a hotel on the top of the mountain instead of the bottom, you are significantly impacted by that, because you just don't recover at altitude. Your sleep quality is compromised. Your inflammatory quality is compromised. You don't want to be at altitude in the days after huge stress events. So that's probably valid. Just while we're on the subject of Ellie there, that given the depth of women's 1500-meter running in the US, and as far as has been reported, and you don't have to necessarily, I don't know if you have to confirm this or not, it's been said that she's not going to run the 5,000 in Paris, but will run the 1,500. Did you feel it was a big risk to put those 5,000s in front of the main event at the trials? Like, let's say she's a bit on tired legs and she can't produce a 3:55.99 and
Yeah.
doesn't get to qualify in the main event. What was the calculus like there?
Yeah, that would have been on me if she didn't. So Ellie, she's tough as nails, but she's also sensitive, and I think that sometimes she feels like pressure from the outside world. So like we were just going to do the 1500 at the trials all along, no 5K, and then maybe like two and a half weeks before the trials, we were just chit chatting, and she's just like, I really feel the pressure for this 1500, and like why, like I'm always trying to prove myself. It seems like she's like, in the US, like we're always proving ourselves, like proven every year we have to prove ourselves to make a team. And she's like, I know everybody else is going through the same thing that I am, but she's like, it's damn hard, Mark. And so she said, I mean, we knew, like she said, well, maybe I should just do the 5K and take the pressure off of the 1500, because we were really confident she was going to make the 5K team. Like the only way she's not going to make the 5K team is if she falls on her face or gets sick or something like that. So she and I decided, like, let's do the 5K, take the pressure off, be on the Olympic team, go into the 1500, without the weight of the world on her shoulders to make the 15 team. And that's what we did. And going into the trials, I was just telling her, I was like, yeah, because she ran 3:56 at pre, one week after running 14:31 or 35 or whatever she ran. So we knew, like, in a week, and we went back up to altitude after that, and like the recovery was a little off, I thought. So I really thought in my heart that she could do both and do them well, but I didn't think that it would take 3:55 high to make the team. We left the 3:56 woman home, who's a superstar in my book, and so it was a calculated risk, and it paid off, because she was pretty content, going into the rounds. And I felt like, the race strategy was for her to lead to take it out hard, try to take the kick out of some of the women if she could. And, she ran a perfect race. If you can run a perfect race and come in third place.
Yeah. It's a good segue into, I guess, our next part of this discussion. And it talks about the training and the building up to an Olympic Games. Now, one of the questions I've always asked about the American system in particular is that obviously athletes have to peak to some extent for the trials, and then a month later you've got the Olympics. Just take us through sort of a year of planning for you as a coach, and how do you get athletes to stay at a high level, basically, I would imagine, for a month, or how does it work post trials and pre-Olympics?
So I don't look at it as like a 4-year cycle. Like I kind of look at it 1 year at a time for my team. And so, like when the summer ended last year, everybody takes their break or whatever. Ellie had a baby, so she was just running easy mileage and stuff like that most of the summer. But I still had her she ran Fifth Avenue last September, and she ran like 4:25 in the mile. And she was feeling pretty good first race back, and I was like, all right, let's just pretend it's a regular season now. Let's take a couple weeks off, and let's start a proper build for next June. And we were looking at the Olympic trials as, where we want to try to run our best race so far this year. And so I just do a typical fall. So like I'm kind of like a Lydiard guy. So like I kind of like to do like a fair amount of volume. So like in the fall, we do pretty good mileage. We try to build our mileage up. Everybody's different on the team depending who they are. Some people that might be 50 miles a week, or 80 miles a week. So I'm not good with the Ks. You guys can translate it a little bit, but so like 100K is 62 miles. So somewhere 100K to 150K. I don't know, something like that. But and we just do a lot of strength work, a lot of hills. We'll do tempo runs, we'll do fartleks. We won't step on a track or go near a track in the fall. And everything's at I'm going to say like 80% effort. So the thresholds, I mean, we go into the lab and we find out what their VO2 max is and what their threshold pace and what their heart rates are and things like that, so we can incorporate that into when they're doing a tempo run or threshold run. And we do hills. I'm always like, like 80% this, 80%, 70%. Like we just try not to kill the fall. We just try to stay healthy and build a nice aerobic base. Like I want these people to be aerobic monsters, because part of me thinks speed is overrated. And um, if you can't hang in there, then you can't even use any speed that you have. So let's figure out how to be an aerobic beast. And so we do that. We do that in the fall, and we've gone to altitude in the fall. Sometimes we've just stayed in New England and Boston area. But then everybody kind of goes home for the holidays around Christmas, New Year's, whatever. And then for like the last 7 or 8 years, we've gone to Flagstaff in January. And when we go up to Flagstaff, I don't know if you want me to get into too much details, but when we get up to Flagstaff, we stay up there for between 4 and 5 weeks. Most of the science that I've got from the USOC, from Randy Wilbur, says that you want a minimum of 21 days exposure, but then there's some people that get another boost between that 21 and 28 days. So it just makes sense to stay the 28 days if you're one of those people that get that extra little boost of extra red blood cells. And then we usually come down and do a couple of indoor races, 2 or 3 indoor races in the US. And like last year we stayed up in Flag for about 4.5 weeks. And then we came down, and I'll just use Ellie as an example. She ran the 3K at the New Balance Boston Games. And it was her first race, like serious race, since having the baby. And she ran 8:25 in the 3K, and just got nipped by Jess Hall, the great Australian woman runner. And so that was a really good start. Then a week later, we went to Millrose Games, and Ellie set the American record in the mile and ran 4:16 low, which was great. And then the following week, after we did that, she's like, well, I think I want to run the 3K at World Champs. I feel like I'm a pretty good 3K in Scotland. And so the next weekend, we had to go back to Albuquerque and run a 3,000. She had to make the team indoors, this top 2 at the US Champs indoors. And she won that pretty easily. And but that was a hard race. It's the first time she'd ever run a race as a pro at altitude. And Albuquerque's like at a mile high, so 1,600 meters high or something like that. And she found that really hard. But she's like, it felt hard the whole way, but I felt like I could keep running, And so then we went over to Glasgow, and she ended up, having the perfect race. It was hard, but it wasn't like over the top. She got to sit on some great women runners the whole way. And then she outkicked Segay and ran 8:20, which is, a serious world-class time. It's like the third or fourth fastest ever indoors, big American record by 5 seconds. And she said to me after that like, she felt like she could have run another lap or 2 at that pace. Not the last lap, obviously, but at the pace that they were doing. So that gave me a lot of confidence that she could run a good 5K, this spring. And her speed strength, kicking off of a really hard pace is amazing. And so that's kind of how we approach the winter. And then with that 3K,
just to clarify, when she's been at that high altitude camp at Flagstaff and she comes down and does competitive races, then is she doing some level of intensity when she at that relatively, in terms of the Olympic cycle, it's relatively early? Is she anywhere near peak there, or is she 80%?
No, I think she's like, I don't want to say peak, but I want to say she's aerobically fit as you can be. Like we do, even like an outdoor track now, like getting ready for the Olympics and 15s and things like that. We do a lot. We do a lot of work at 5K, 6K pace. I do a ton of work at like 72s, which is 15-minute 5K. 72s, lap on the track is 15-minute 5K pace. We do just so much of that. So like a typical week would be like on Tuesdays we usually do threshold work. So that could be, a tempo run of 5 miles, or it could be, 4x2K at, 5:30 mile pace. Just like we know what their heart rate is supposed to be, what their max heart rate is, and we just come down to 85%, things like that. And we talk about effort. So, so like Elliott's like in the 5:20s is usually a good threshold pace for her. So like I'll say like, all right, let's do 5 miles at 5:25 pace. Oh, but it's cold and windy and you have clothes on. So let's make sure it's 5:25 effort. That might be 5:35, out on the roads today. So like we're really she's really learned to feel the race or feel pace, which I think's amazing. So like if she can run 5-minute miles all day, but if it's snowing and windy out around the outdoor track, 5-minute mile might be 5:10s. So like she'll have to run 5:10s, and like we'll talk about that. That's a 5-minute effort, so she can still walk away from the session feeling good about herself and knowing that she got the work in. And I don't think the body knows the difference, if it's the same effort if you're going slower because it's harder. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
And,
All
and
right.
so we just keep building. So we just keep building like that. So like now after indoor track, we said, oh, it's 3 months or till the Olympic trials. Let's take a couple of down weeks again. Let's just like recover, go back home to Vermont, and let's just do some volume again. And then we went back up to altitude again right after the Boston Marathon. We like to be in Boston for the marathon because it's such a fun, exciting, a lot of energy in the town that weekend, and see that. Then we usually go to Flag right after that for another 4 or 5 weeks, and then we come down and try to run a couple of races that lead into the U.S. champs. So it's not like, and it just seems to work. Because like one thing I was scared about coming on the show, because I'm not like this super duper smart scientist like Ross or whatever, but I think I'm pretty good at reading people and seeing if they're working hard and or working too hard, or if they look too easy. Like I think I'm really good at that, and seeing how they're feeling and their personality, because you just need to be happy to run hard. That's what I mean. One of the things you need is to be happy to run hard.
So essentially, by the time she gets to US trials, she's got the benefit of having that second camp at high altitude. Plus, she's been competitive and going through a cycle of competition intensity and recovery. So it's, in other words, it's not a linear process. It's more a cycle, mini cycles within the process.
Yeah, I would think so. I think I would agree with that. And she was down at sea level. I don't remember off the top of my head now, but like 30 something days before the Scotland 3K, and she was just down like 2 more days before the 5K started here. So I feel like we were down the same amount of time that she was successful, in Glasgow, and then successful at our Olympic trial. So this is the tricky part between now and going to Paris. Like we're still debating a little bit exactly what to do. Like we definitely need this recovery week this week. I mean, mentally and physically. But should we, get back? Should we get up to San Moritz next week and do 3 weeks up there and then come down for a couple of days before we race in Paris? Or does it make sense just to stay in the Boston area and train and then just go over to Paris a week before? And we're still debating it a little bit. I've been talking to Randy Wilbur, who's a good friend of mine, works for the USOC as an exercise physiologist, and he's over in San Moritz right now. And he always says to me, just like, don't overthink it, don't get fancy. Staying at home is just almost probably just as good as coming to an altitude camp right now. So I think we have like 2 good decisions. Neither one's right or wrong, but I mean both right. Neither one's wrong. So so it's just going to be mostly what the team thinks will work best for them mentally right now.
What has been your experience of the altitude with respect to the 1500-meter training? Because the challenge with altitude, as you know, is you can't always do the intensity work at altitude. So I suppose in the last few weeks before the Olympic Games, you would want to focus a little bit on intensity. I appreciate the aerobic beast desire, which I'd actually like you to explain a little bit more on.
I love that.
But as you move in towards the Olympics now, like the 1500-meter demands, like especially because it's, the third and fourth lap is going to determine those medals.
Right.
Who knows? We'll talk about what you think will happen in Paris in that event. Actually, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts. But I suppose one of the things you'd have to take into account is if I go to altitude, do I compromise the intensity work, and does that matter at this stage more than it would have done maybe in the fall last year and before World Indoors?
Right. And the other thing you have to take into consideration is the heat and humidity in Paris, I think. So it's very hot and humid here in Boston right now. So I think getting acclimated to that's a big deal. So like if you're up in San Moritz, there's no humidity and it's not boiling hot. I know it's easy to get down into Italy and do some, training and heat and stuff like that. And the USOC has like sent out basically a flow chart how to prepare for heat and humidity, even if you're at altitude or if you're at sea level. Like we don't have to worry about preparing for heat and humidity if we stay here in Boston, because it is what it is. It's hot and humid. It's going to be just very similar to Paris. But if you're in San Moritz or if you're in Flagstaff, you need to figure out how to prepare, whether it's running with more clothes on, whether it's trying to get in a sauna or whatever. And I read a lot. I read a lot of stuff, and like even like some of the science is saying like if you're training hard at altitude and you go into sauna, it kind of defeats the purpose of heat training and things like that. And so it's really tricky. It's really tricky. So I rather just see everybody get to Paris being healthy and happy, and like just like you only have so much willpower, and you're going to need a lot of willpower to get through the heats and run well in that final. So we can really, and we'll sharpen up on our speed and do a little bit more speed stuff, but not this week. We'll start getting back into it next week.
What I'm interested to know, and it's a slight segue on what you were talking about, is that for you as a coach, and because you've been an athlete as well, I'm watching this Netflix series Sprint, which I'm sure you guys have seen in the States already. I've watched a couple of episodes, and there's a couple of things that have popped out to me. And one of them is what the role of the coach is at an elite level, because obviously at elite level, athletes have a certain amount of, they don't need to be told how to run. They have to tweak. Is your role a guidance one? In other words, when you make decisions about training, do you collaborate with your athletes, or are they looking for you for guidance? In other words, what's that relationship like between you as a coach versus an athlete? Because I know a lot of athletes at an amateur level, they just want to know what they're supposed to do. They don't want to have to think about it too much. But do elites want to think about it and know about it more than they would just be told how to do it?
I think it's a little bit more, you collab a little bit more and talk to them, like about race strategies. Like we'll talk about race strategies. I'll take their opinion in. I'll say like for a long run, like, they know that they need to do a long run and it has to be, 10 to 20 miles or whatever, it's like, how you feeling? So we'll get the feedback. But like one thing, like I know that like the team is bought in or really trusts me is when I hear them say something that I've said to them, it comes back out of them, like 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 oh, it's windy out today, 520 is 535 effort. And like when I hear them say that, I know that they've bought into what I've been preaching to them or trying to teach to them. And that makes me feel good, and that makes me know that they trust me. And I think trust is the biggest thing between an athlete and a coach is trust, and the athlete knowing that the coach is all in for them and that the coach, cares about them more as a person than as an athlete. And on my team, like the most important thing on my team is for the athletes to know how much I care for them, and I'm more concerned about their well-being in the long term than running. And we have these conversations as a group, and I think that's one of the best things that I do as a coach is create this safe environment where they know they can run hard, and failure, as much as it hurts, it's not the end of the world. The world doesn't change. Heather McLean on my team, she just missed making the 1500 meters last weekend in Eugene. She was on the Olympic team in Tokyo, and she ran 3:58. She was on the team with 100 meters to go on Sunday, and she didn't make it. And she's heartbroken, but she also knows that like her family's still there, I'm still there, her boyfriend's still there. The world doesn't change, that much when you make the Olympic team. Like they know I ran in the Olympics, and it didn't really. It's cool and everything, and you get to run there. It's the biggest thing that you can do running wise or athletically, but it doesn't change who you are as a person, and the world's not going to change. And that's really, really important, like in my situation. And I think that's what I really, really do best is I've cultivated, I've made a little family with New Balance Boston where the team cares about each other really, really passionately, and looks out for each other. And Heather went out on Sunday night with the team, to celebrate a little bit. And like, if she wasn't such a strong, great person, she would have just went home and sulked, or packed her bags and headed to the airport. But she was out there with her teammates, and it made me so happy that that she was there, and she knows, right, how, she just knows, like, that um, as much as she's hurting inside, that these other people, her teammates, and she cared so much about them, that she was out there with them celebrating. So, and I
Oh,
think that's the most important thing.
That's a lovely insight, actually, because I've often wondered, like, coaches to some extent have such an emotional role to play, which you've already explained. And I think for you as an athlete, I guess it's an advantage because you know what it's like to succeed and not succeed, and how you have to deal with that in your life. You've experienced that.
Right, right. And I think, like, and I love the Olympics, and like I would have chopped my arm off to go there, but it's like it's a little bit like Christmas, like the build up for Christmas. You just, when you're a little kid, you just can't wait, and like, when's Santa gonna come? And like the build up's almost more fun than like the event. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but like it has a little bit of that feeling, like the Olympics are definitely not a letdown, but maybe I'm like out of date because I got crushed in the Olympics. So if I'm winning a medal, it might be different. But I
They
think the
say
build up.
they say that the people who win the Olympics often get depressed because now what? You know that phenomenon where you've achieved what you intended, now you no longer have a purpose, and so you say, well, where do I go?
Mm.
So there's definitely, I reckon, even the Olympic medalist might for a moment experience euphoria, but then I think it disappears pretty quickly if there's no foundation beneath it.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, you read about that. Like, I've read a couple of papers about, American pro sports. When they retire, they don't know what to do, and there's depression, and that's where they, go bankrupt because they're living too large, because they don't know what to do with their time, their
Yeah.
money. It's mostly depression. No one's patting them on the back anymore. Things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, you said something earlier, like your main job and the most important thing is to create a culture, a family. You said something earlier about the most important thing is for the athlete to be happy. With those things in mind, what are the characteristics that make a great distance runner then? And now I don't mean VO2 max and running economy and threshold and the stuff that we talk about on this podcast all the time. Because it sounds to me that maybe you'd be looking, when you scout for your next additions to your squad, you're looking for something other than that then.
Yeah. I feel like I'm lucky enough that, that I've been around a lot of really good runners, a lot of really good coaches, and a lot of people took me under their wings along the way. Um, so I think my perspective is pretty good, like looking for people. So there's a lot of schools in New England, and every school has a track team basically. And I'll be at a lot of the meets in Boston. Pros are there and the college kids, so I'm at those meets at the same time. Like at Boston University, like you guys have probably heard of BU. It's a super fast track. Everybody just like runs out of their minds there, and I'll be in there, and like there's one of the women that just made. I'll just use an example. One of the women that just made our U.S. Olympic team, Emily Mackay. She went to a small school in upstate New York, SUNY Binghamton's, and it's a small athletic program. The team's not that big. They don't have a ton of scholarships, so the kids are paying to go to school. And I was at a meet at Boston at BU, and I saw this woman run, and she looked like a good runner, and then I was like, she had like spikes on from like Walmart or something. She didn't have the carbon plated shoes and this and that. And SUNY Binghamton, her school, they're not flying out to California. They don't have the budget to fly out to California and run at Stanford or in LA at these big meets. Or they're not flying out to Eugene and running in meets out there. And she just looked really good to me running. And so I asked a couple of college coaches what they knew about her, and they just said she's a wonderful person, and a sweet kid. And so like eventually introduced myself to her, talked to her. She made NCAA's championships only her senior year in college, and I knew, like, I could just kind of tell like she was going to be good, and so I was kind of hoping like she wouldn't even make the finals, and then no one else would see her, and then we could like go approach her and see if we could get her to come on our team, and so she ran halfway decent, and so I got in touch with her again and asked her if she'd like to come meet everybody on the team, and she came and met everyone. Like, one rule that I have is that we won't put anybody on the team unless the rest of the team thinks that it's a nice match, because at the end of the day, it's not my team, it's the runners team, right? I'm just the director and coaching them, but it's like, at the end of the day, it's their team, it's their careers, and they all liked Emily a lot, and we got her on the New Balance Boston. She ended up running 4:12 for the 15 and 1500 in college. It's pretty good, right? It's not world class, but it's pretty good. And we got her in the new spikes, and her first race in the new spikes, she runs 4:08 and makes the final at the U.S. Outdoor Champs. And then she got smoked in the final, but we were like, whoa, 4:08, and then we're like, well, she gets a fall training with Ellie and Heather and the rest of the team. She's just going to get stronger aerobically. She'll be able to handle the pace a little bit better. And then last year, she started really coming through. She ran 3:59 for 15 in Marseille in France, and then was second in the Pan Am Games. And so since last fall, we've been talking about trying to make this Olympic team. And 3 weeks ago now, she ran 1:57 for an 800, and then on the weekend she ran 3:56 and made the team. But I think just finding this, you could just tell she was athletic and fit, and then talking to her attitude, she's happy, she's smiling all the time. I've never seen her not with a smile on her face. Just really good positive energy. She's not bringing the team the wrong direction, that's for sure. And so it's kind of like that. I mean, it's organic, kind of how we find them, but we won't bring anybody on the team unless we know that they're a pretty good fit, or going to be a nice fit. And I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier about creating a family and making a safe, fun, challenging environment for them.
Do you get in a situation like we've had? Obviously, there have been, the last couple of years, talks about the way some coaches, which we won't mention, have done things like weighing athletes every week to make sure they haven't put on extra weight, fat shaming, all that kind of thing. Do you have those kind of discussions with your athletes to talk about what it is that you need to measure? What are the physical things that you need to be able to see whether there's improvement? In other words, how do you manage the performance aspects? Because it sounds like you're handling the emotional aspect very well.
Right. So I mean, everybody on my team's pretty smart. So I mean, they know what you're supposed to look like or be. And if you do take a good look at my team, we don't have any skinny toothpicks, anorexic, people that have eating issues, and we're just, the people on my team, if they weren't distance runners, they'd probably be, they're very, very good athletes. They'd be playing soccer or whatever, playing different sports. And they're very, very healthy. And so we don't have a scale. Like in our team room or anything like that. I don't talk about weight. I talk about making good decisions. I talk about nutrition. Like when we're all together, I might, say something like, like the mental aspect again. Like during COVID, the USOC had a couple of like Zoom things like this that you could sit in. They have experts talking, and they were talking about depression. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but like before COVID, 20% of athletes or adolescents, people between 18 and 25 suffered depression. And then after COVID, it's up to like 60% of people between 25, 18 and 25 or whatever. And so I got the team together and I was like, listen, hey, I did this podcast thing with the USOC last night, and they were talking about depression and this and that. And I just want you to know that I'm here if anything's going on, and blah, 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 and the team went out for a run, and, came back in, and then one of the women on the team came in and said, like, I've really been struggling, and thanks, Mark, for saying that. And I always know I can come forward, but that really made me want to come forward after this run and talk to you. So I think things like that, or what I do. I'm not going to say, hey, you need to lose 5 pounds, like to be a good 1,500 meter runner. I think that they know, their body types, and they know what it takes, and they know it's their career, and they know what they need to do. So, and I'm glad that I don't have to touch that stuff. That rarely have to touch that stuff.
It's interesting because it's hardly the cutthroat world of elite performance where it's portrayed so often as dog eat dog, competitive, everyone's an enemy. The motivation that you often see portrayed that athletes need to have is not what you're trying to cultivate. What do you think of the perception that's created like that? Because and what you're saying is not new, I don't think, to listeners. They would know that happy teams are successful teams. You need a degree of collaboration in a team, teamwork, and so on, ownership by the athletes. But it's just interesting
But
to me that
in the same breath, that you also believe, and this is why it's a good discussion point, is that you do believe that it's like the marginal gains thing. If you're 300 grams less, than you were yesterday, you're going to run faster. So there's a happy team is a good team, but also performance matters. So it's that balance, I think, what you're saying, Ross.
Yeah, I mean, like I do a little bit of work with a athletics program here, and it's high school kids, and we go out and we find kids from relatively poor, sometimes extremely poor backgrounds and broken homes and so on, and offer them scholarships, and it's funded. And sometimes I don't want to call them politicians, but let's say the funders will come along, and the first thing they say is, "How many medals have you won this season?" That's not really. We're not here to win medals. We're actually here to like change young kids' lives. And yeah, that might mean that they win medals, but actually they're going to finish school at a good school, get into universities or colleges, whatever it is. And that's actually and so I know that the coaches bristle when they get asked that question. So it's part of the process, but it's not the objective. And I'm just interested in your thoughts on that, because we could change things in our program to make it much more high performance intensive. But then we've moved away from our vision and mission, but maybe we'd win more medals now.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. It's not, I mean, the USOC or whatever, the American public wants people to win medals, but you have to remember that all these runners or athletes, they're people, and they're people first. And the most important thing is their well-being and happiness at the end of the day. And the sport's going to keep moving on. Someone's going to break Usain Bolt's world record. Someone's going to get a new marathon world record. And if you do all this work and you're not happy and you run fast, it just, to me personally, it's just not worth it. And and a coach that comes down on a kid like it's 1970, that's ridiculous, right? So my daughter's on my team, and I think having her on the team has made me a better coach, because I love this kid more than anything in the world. And if she was getting coached by somebody else, I want her to be treated the way that I'm coaching her and treating her, And when she went to Georgetown, when she went off to college, I went into the coach's office and I said, listen, man, I love this kid more than anything in the world. And like, I'm not going to be here to make sure everything's perfect. Please, please take care of her. And I meant take care of her as a human being, not, make her into, Olympic trials qualifier, NCAA champ. But I wanted her to, grow as a person. And so she could come back home happy and be successful in life. I don't want to, I didn't want issues to come from the sport, if that makes sense. So I think having her on my team makes me coach better, because I treat everybody on my team like their family, like they're, someone that I care about very deeply.
Could you put, I mean, this is a leading question, but with that sort of attitude, do you think that you potentially brought up people that are going to be happier in life, but do you think you potentially lost some performance results as a result of that? And are you happy that that compromise is okay? Or do you think that a happy athlete becomes a good athlete?
Oh yeah. I mean, especially in distance running. I mean, it hurts so much to run hard. If you're not happy, you can't even do it. I think we're better. I'm not saying, I mean, we train our asses off. Like we train hard, and I think we train really smart too. I'm not saying that like I'm a softie as a coach, like you could ask the women on my team or a couple of guys on the team, like if I'm a softie at practice, I'm not a softie, but I do listen to them, and I think they know their bodies and they know how they're feeling. So like if we're doing 5 times a mile at 5 flat pace, and after 4 of them, someone says to me, "Oh man, this is tough today. Do you think I should do the last one?" We'll have a little bit of banter back and forth, and then we'll make a decision. Like, and sometimes I'm like, "Yeah, you need to suck it up today because your race is in 6 weeks. It's not, not in 10 days." Or oh yeah, you have a race right around the corner. Like 4 is good. We don't need 5. Let's not get greedy, and we can operate like that. So yeah, so I'm not a softie, but I think that having a great team environment is super duper important.
How do you assess the personality of your athletes and then decide whether you need a hard touch or the soft touch? Some
Um,
athletes, yeah,
yeah,
you know what I
yeah,
mean?
I do totally know what you mean. Yeah, sometimes they do need a kick in the butt, like you don't want to be resting on your laurels and that. Like I can just tell like their attitude when they come into practice. Sometimes they're not there. Like Ellie, for example, like last December before we kind of took a break to go home for the holidays, I said I said we're gonna do a 3K time trial, and so she ran like 8:55 or something for a 3K, and she was pretty happy with that. And I was like, all right, you got 5 minutes rest. We're doing another one. And so she was like, oh my god. And so we did another one, and she ran 8:44 or something, and she didn't think she could do that, but I thought she could. And the other people, like a friend of mine that works at New Balance too, I was telling him about it, and he was like, I think she can do it too. And so I had to do it. So I kind of like she didn't want to do anymore, but I made her do another 3K. And when she ran 8:40 something for a second 3K after 5 minutes rest, she knew that she was like all the aerobic work and strength work that we were doing all fall was starting to pay off, and it was going to come back to help her in the winter and this spring. So I'm not a pushover. I don't want you guys to think I'm a pushover, this guy, but
No,
I'm a nice guy.
you just sound like a really nice. And the reason why I asked that is because I think you come across as somebody who really cares about the athletes, and we've heard so many examples of coaches that are quite brutal about this type of thing because they believe unless you are this brutal kind of draconian type of athlete, you're not going to get the results. That's why I'm quite interested to know your approach, because just in our discussions with you, people believe and trust and like you, and what you're suggesting is that you're not compromised by that philosophy, that you are getting the results as a result of that. You don't need to be this hardcore brutal coach to get the results.
And then can I ask on top of that then, as a follow-on, is your philosophy and what you've been describing to us for the last 15, 20 minutes based on a positive experience you had as an athlete, or is it a negative experience and you're trying to do the opposite of what you were exposed to? And obviously you don't have to implicate people. I'm just
Yeah.
curious about how your own mindset has evolved as an athlete. And then the part B to that question is, if you could go back now and be an athlete again, what are some of the areas that you regret most not doing?
Right. So I was really lucky. I think I had good coaching. I ran in high school, so like my high school coaches, they just loved running. They weren't like experts in track and field. They were like a history teacher that's just doing something, um, that they like, but they're not experts at it. So in high school, running for me was just fun. And then I got to college. I got a scholarship to go run in college, and it was a little bit more serious in college. And I think that I had a young college coach who overtrained us. We trained too hard. So like every workout was like a race, and I think we always raced tired. And when I got out of college, I moved back home, and I grew up just a few miles from Providence, Rhode Island, and Providence College had some really good runners on the team or training there at the time. John Tracy, he took second in LA, won a couple of world cross country championships. Just a bunch of Jeff Smith won the New York City Marathon, the Boston Marathon. a bunch of really good British and Irish runners were there. And I went down and just like introduced myself and kind of forced myself on them and ran with them every day. And they 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 were just nice guys and fun and cared about each other in this locker room, even though they were all professionals. John Gregoric was another guy, a U.S. guy who made 3 U.S. Olympic teams, back in the 80s and early 90s. And I started running with them, and like I found out they didn't kill it every day. They took their recovery days seriously. They took their hard days seriously. They weren't afraid to have a beer at dinner. After a big meet, they would go out and celebrate. They seemed like normal people to me. They weren't like, so high strung and tense and everything mattered. They didn't get their 2-hour nap. Their afternoon run was going to be crappy and this and that. And I started running and working out with them and keeping up with them or being ahead of them in some workouts. And I was like, shit, like I should be able to do this, And like after training with them for 6 months, like I never broke 14 minutes for 5K, and I ran my first 5K and I ran 13:30, and I had never broke 4 minutes in the mile. The first mile I ran after running with them, I ran 3:58 in the mile. And it just all just kind of started to sink in. And then I'm divorced now, but my ex-wife wanted to get her PhD in number theory, and we were looking for a place where we could both run and she could study math. And we picked Boulder, and we went out to Boulder, Colorado, and she went to CU and got her PhD in number theory. And she also my ex-wife won. She also made the team at 10K and ran the first 10 in Barcelona in '92. But we got out to Boulder, and the guys in Providence were just like, "Hey, if I was you, I'd just go knock on Arturo Barrios's door and see what he's doing." And Arturo had the 10K world record at the time, and I went out there and knocked on the door basically, and Arturo said, "Sure, you can run with me." And then I met Steve Jones, who had the world record in the marathon, back then, and Mark Platches was there, and a lot of people. Deke was there occasionally, and they were just so nice to me, and they trained hard, but they didn't kill themselves every day. And I just learned from these guys that you have to train hard, you have to be consistent, and 5 months of consistency without taking a day off is way better than having 2 hard weeks and going super intense, and then you can't walk because your Achilles tendon's blown up. And I saw how well they did when they went to international races, and they're bringing medals home and have world records, and like I was like, they're doing something right, and they're not crazy. And so I just stole everything from everybody. So I stole their training in Providence, I stole their training in Boulder. I talked to people, I absorbed it. I mean, I was getting into running. I probably the only person in the world that's read Timothy Noakes' big book, The Lore of Running, like 3 times cover to cover. Just like I just ate it up, and like like I don't know, and I just learned from those people, and I just kind of coach like that, I think.
So it sounds like stole is the wrong word. It's more assimilated,
Yeah.
because you become a student of the sport rather than somebody that's stolen. I think Ross, it's probably true of most coaches that people have assimilated a lot of knowledge via other coaches and got to the place that they are because they see what works for them.
It's better than trying to invent it from the
Absolutely.
start every single time, and you'll never move,
Exactly.
Yeah, and like I remember like running with Arturo, in Boulder, and like after every run, he would do 10 times 100-meter strides, just to get his fast twitch muscles moving a little bit, loosen you up, strengthen your tendons, and just makes you feel better. Kind of just like flush the legs out. And I remember talking to him, and I was like, "Where did you get that?" And he's like, "Oh, over in Europe, I would just watch the Kenyans, and the Kenyans, like after every run, like at a meet or something like Oslo, like the day before a meet, you go for a run, and like there they are doing strides, and the Kenyans are doing strides after every run." So like I started incorporating strides into my training, and it helped. And so like Arturo took it from the Kenyans. I took it from Arturo, and my team, we do strides after almost every run. And I think they work wonders. We do them year round. We're doing strides in the fall, after every run, we're doing strides basically. And I really feel like, it opens your stride length up. I feel like, you're touching your fast twitch fibers. You're not ignoring them, for months on end. I feel like they just like you just get a little bit looser when you do that after a run. Like after you guys exercise, like after you run like 10 miles or something, 15K, when you're done, you're kind of like taking baby steps. You might be sitting down, but then you do some strides and get that, snap and pop back in your stride, and you start feeling better. And so yeah, things like that happen.
Yeah, I mean, I always advise people, with my job as editor of Runner's World here, that the best way to finish a run is to finish quickly, because you want to open that stride out a bit and keep when you finish fast. So psychologically, I think to some extent, when you can run fast at the end of a run, it psychologically benefits you when you get into a more race specific situation. So yeah, I think it's a great tip that's been passed down by the generations.
It is. And
So
like sometimes, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to move on to the next subject, and I think this is something where they're kind of digressing slightly, but they're in the world of sport right now. I wanted to know what your thoughts are about the super shoes at the moment, because you've obviously played in the game where marathon running is there. That the super shoes are becoming more and more relevant in the track side as well. Do you have any thoughts on that? Are you pro? Are you con? Where do you sit on that?
I'm on both sides on this one. I don't like how they were kind of snuck into the Olympics, and Rio, and on a few Nike runners, and no one else in the world knew who they were, or the Olympic trials going into Rio. They got Nike snuck them onto some runners' feet, and they probably wouldn't have made the team, or they might, I don't know if they would or would not have made the team, but it wasn't a level playing field. So like I don't like that. Now I think every shoe company, um, they're all basically the same now. So I think like everybody is basically running on a level playing field. But the one thing that I've noticed and I can't stand about them is they help some people more than others. So like I think there's like a lot of people, these shoes have made them world class when they probably wouldn't have been. Like if you look at some people running and they got terrible form, their running economy is off. And if you put them in running shoes from the 70s or 80s, they wouldn't be world class. But now you put them in these shoes, and all of a sudden they're world class. And I don't think that the shoes help someone that has like beautiful, perfect form and can run fast in anything. I don't think they help quite as much as they help other people. So that really irks me a little bit. Like if if all things equal, the person, the least talented runner, the least person with the worst form or running economy or whatever you want to say, wouldn't have made the team. But with these new shoes, they make the team, and someone that's actually a better runner, if they were running barefoot or in noble shoes or something like that, would have made the team. So I hate them in that sense. I and another reason why I don't like them is because you can't compare. Like I know Roger Bannister's shoes weren't the same as the ones I was running in, or he was running on cinders, but it didn't change that much since the 50s or whenever he was running, to 5 years ago or 8 years ago. Like a sub 4 minute mile was a big deal. And now, like with these new shoes, like everybody can break 4 minutes in the mile. So I think I want, I wanted I don't know if you can compare the times now to the times that in the past, like you used to be able to. And then like even like I work for New Balance, and so like a lot of the contracts, there's time bonuses in them, and so like we're like, what the heck? Like where's like what's the time bonus? Like what good is a time bonus now if people are just like breaking through like crazy? And so like I'm not I don't want to go into like the total details, but like maybe we shouldn't have time bonuses anymore. Maybe we don't in some of our contracts because we need it to all level out again, so we know what a good time is. In the old days, you would have like a contract we might say, if you broke 2:10, you'll get X amount added on your salary. If you broke 2:08, you get X amount added onto your yearly stipend. But now like people are running 2:02s and 2:03s. Is that really a 2:06 or is that a 2:10 from a few years ago? And then
you just you have to recalibrate. No, that's what
yeah,
it was. It's like just a recalibration of history, against history rather.
Yeah, I don't like that, right? But I also think it's fun to run fast, and I think it's really cool that people on my team are running really fast. And and I don't talk to him about that. I mean, I might joke about it, I was like, oh man, if I had those shoes, I would right around 329. But but I know it's not gonna. So I do like them and I don't like them. I like the fact that you might be able to train a little bit harder in them. So like recovery might be a little bit better. Like people are running a 10K hard on the roads in a race and they're not beat up on Monday and Tuesday that badly. And like if I used to run a hard 10K, like I was sore, beat up, lots of, I'm guessing tons of micro, tears in my muscles and things like that. And it would take me a week before I wanted to work out again. And like the people now, like they're running a hard 10K on a Sunday and like they're ready to go again on Tuesday, physically. And so I don't know if they are like mentally, but so people are getting in, more workouts now, and like maybe these double thresholds that you're reading about and see now, maybe, they weren't possible 10 years ago because the recovery between runs, the muscle damage or whatever, you probably couldn't do them, but now you're not getting as beat up. So you could do like, you could do like a threshold run in the morning and then come back to the track in the afternoon and do some 400s, where I think that would almost be impossible without these new shoes. So like in that sense, like they're good, but I don't, I just feel like you can't compare. And I think that's one of the fun things about the sport was comparing yourself to like Roger Bannister or Quacks or I don't know, anybody from the old days,
Mm. I know that. I mean, we had a chat to Jeff Burns a couple of podcasts ago where he touched a bit on the fact that you have the responders and non-responders. Do you have a protocol when it comes to these shoes? In other words, Jeff was saying, for instance, he likes to look at his members of the team and then say, right, okay, he's going to try as many different shoes on the athletes as possible to see which shoe he responds that athlete
Right.
responds it better. I mean, you're obviously with New Balance as an elite coach there, so are you bound obviously to use New Balance, and do you test different shoes with different athletes to see which one they respond to better?
Yeah. So obviously, like everybody on my team has to wear New Balance, but the New Balance lab is right across the hallway from the New Balance Boston team area. So we'll get everybody into the lab, and they'll check their running economy and all the different shoes and different spikes and see which one they're most efficient in, and those are the ones they'll recommend to race. And so, like, one road race in flat, the 5-minute pace is at 80% effort, and another one 5-minute pace is 70% effort. We'll recommend they get in the one that they can run faster in. So yeah, we're definitely on top of that. And we also use the lab for like, find out what their VO2 max is and what their, like all their numbers are and things like that. Cause like, it kind of like drives me crazy. Like when we're out at the track now and like you see coaches like trying to get take lactic, take a little blood and see what their lactic acid is at after like intervals and things like that. And I know, like I tried it a couple times and I'm like, I know I'm messing it up, like getting too much blood on the paper or whatever. And I just know I'm not doing it perfectly well. So I rather go in the lab, get some numbers, and go out in the track and operate off the numbers that we got in the lab environment instead of like me pricking their finger or their ear after an interval when I'm not like, it's not my thing. I'm not educated in it. I can do it. It's easy and I can read the numbers, but it's not what I went to school for, and I feel like people are just doing it because other people are doing it. And I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it, so.
Yeah, makes sense. So just a final kind of question, and this is kind of more general in terms of the way that athletics is at the moment. You've been involved in it for so long. Where do you think track and field is at the moment globally, and the challenges that the sport faces? Do you think it's in a good place?
I I think it can be in a good place. I think we're still struggling a little bit to make it a little bit more popular and mainstream. I think time wise, athletes running fast, good coaching, taking advantage of the latest science, making good choices. I think it's at the best it's probably ever been. I think COVID actually might have helped that a little bit, like let everybody kind of like take a step back and catch our breath and see what we've been doing right or wrong. And so I think the sport is definitely moving in the right direction. I think that we could do a little bit better on drug testing and things like that. I'm not happy with like what goes on in Kenya sometimes, or what's going on in Ethiopia. The U.S. is not this perfect place. There's funny business going on here too. Um, but I think like if they can keep working hard and clean up the sport, it's not fair if a cheat beats you, or someone's doping and they're ahead of you. I really can't stand that. And I think that's going on a teeny bit. I don't know if it's worse now or better than like when I was running, but I know it's still going on and I can't stand that. Um, but I feel like if you were at our Olympic trials this weekend, you would say the sport's in a pretty good place, with how hard people are trying, the energy from the athletes, the coaches. There was good crowds there again. I felt like Eugene was down the last few years with support, but the stands were pretty full every night. And so to me, I mean, I know Paris will be crazy. I was at the European Championships a few weeks ago for track, and the crowds weren't great, but I thought the performance was amazing, and the athletes are so into it, and everybody's talking about Paris and the Olympics. So, yeah, I think it's in a good spot. Always can do better. It could be a little bit more mainstream, but I think it's doing well.
Yeah, Ross, anything from you?
Yeah, I just want to come back to the purpose of this conversation. That was to talk a little bit about Paris again, and so it's the 10th of August, and it's 29 minutes past 8 in the evening, which is
that the start of the athletics program?
That's exactly 4 minutes after the women's 1500-meter final starts. So at 8.
Yeah.
But 8:29 on the 10th.
I can see where this is going.
On the 10th of August.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. Like first of all, where will Mark Coogan be? Will he be in the stadium? I assume you go with your athletes and with well, I was gonna say with luck, but actually, what I really want to know is what will it take for you to have both of your athletes in that final, and what will make a successful Olympics for you? And by successful, I think two things. Number one is the way you framed success earlier in this conversation. Like, how will you look back on the Paris Olympic Games and say that was a good games for us? And number two is by the objective standard to get a medalist in the Olympic Games. What needs to go right for your athletes in that race?
Right. Well, the first thing, like whenever we race, like we talk about it as a team. We talk about this as a team. Like you can't really control. There's no defense in running, right? I mean, you can get to the front and slow down or something like that, but there's no like real defense played in running. So you can only control your own race, your own destiny. So like I always talk to the team about like giving yourself the best shot you can. And how I tell them is like at the bell, you want to have a chance at a medal or you want to have a chance at winning at the bell. So you got to make sure that you're there with a lap to go. And then hopefully the last lap plays out well for you, and you can kick or whatever and win or get a medal. But if you're in the race with a lap to go, you probably did a pretty good job. And at the end of the day, you probably should walk away being happy that you gave it your best shot, right? So so on August, what'd you say? What day is the final again? August 10th? Yeah, August 10th.
Saturday night. It'll be. I mean, it's an unbelievable night. There's a men's marathon is in the morning, and then you got the men's 800 final, the women's hurdles, the men's 5,000, and then your women's 1500 final, and then the 2 4x4 relays close the night off. So it'll be.
So hopefully August 6th, the first round goes well, and we don't have anybody doing that. I don't even know how you say the word repo change or
the repechage.
Repechage on the 7th. Hopefully we don't have anyone in that one, and they run well on the 8th in the semi, and both of them make the final. But if they make the final, and I think they both will make the final because they should, right? If we get over there, we get over the jet lag, and they settle in well. They're both good enough to make the Olympic final. So if they make the Olympic final, and like in the bottom of my heart, I think Ellie can win a medal in Paris. I don't know if it will be gold, silver, bronze, but I know that she has a shot at a medal. And we're gonna have to see how the rounds go, and like see what how some of the other women are running. And if Faith takes it out and is gonna try to run 3:49, like I know Ellie can't run 3:49, so we'll have to run smart and like see who the other players are, the Laura Muirs of the world and things like that. And key off of them, but at the same time run your own race. And I'll tell Ellie, like, if you're close to a medal with a lap to go, you got a good shot at it. When these Olympics are over, we're going to walk away. We're going to be happy, and they were successful. Whether you get gold, silver, bronze, fifth, sixth, seventh, as long as you got everything out of you, and you were there, right? You participated in the race. You don't want to be a spectator in a race. We've all been spectators in races, like watching what's going on up in front, and that's no fun. That's when you walk away and feel like you didn't accomplish what you wanted to do. Mm. So yeah, so that Saturday, I'll be in the stadium. I'll be out on the warm up track with them. And then once they take them underneath into the call rooms, I'll get myself into the stadium and find my seat and sit back and watch and enjoy it.
What are the parting words you say to them when you say goodbye to them from the warm up track?
I always tell them to trust themselves. I always tell them they're world class. I tell them they're good. I stay away from the negative stuff. Like I have a lot of positive self. I tell them a lot of positive things, even like in practice and stuff in between intervals. I'm not going to say like, what were you thinking? Like, what were you doing out there? It's like, all right, you might have been a little bit too hard on this one, or let's pick it up. You look great. I really try to keep it positive. I think the negative BS is what, really hurts. But, I'll remind them there that the world's not going to change no matter how the result of the 1500 final goes. But I'll also tell them that, I'm so proud of them, and you've worked really hard for this, and you're world class, and you belong here. And then they'll go in and they'll give me a hug, or I'll give them a hug, or whatever. And it's like, it's intense. Like I ran the world champs in the Olympics. Like call rooms are pretty intense when they take you underneath like 15, 20 minutes before you run an Olympic final, or just even around at the Olympics. Like it's nerve wracking just sitting with your competitors and staring at them and like trying to get some strides in, or like you still got to go to the bathroom again because your nerves are really cooking. It's like the hardest part is like when you're sitting there staring at your competitors underneath for like 10 or 15 minutes before they bring you out on the track. Like once you get out on the track and you do a couple of strides, get the heart rate right where you want it, and then once the gun goes off, you're fine. But it's like that half hour when you leave the coach to when they get you out onto the track to start. That's the hardest part. And I just hope that they deal with it well.
Have you been working with them, or even with someone else with them, to try and prepare for that? Because they're not exactly novices, and this is not their first rodeo, as it were, but it is the biggest one.
Right.
And
yeah.
If all the pressures that the US trial impose, and some of them have been to world champs, you've got a world champion in the stable there in Ellie. But like, to what extent can you plant the right seeds now, or is it just something you learn through exposure?
Yeah, I think you learn it through exposure, but I think it's hard every time. So like in Glasgow, they had the warm up was like in this back huge auditorium type room. You could jog around and stuff. And then when they took you underneath the track to go into the call room, like 20 minutes before the final, I was walking in with Ellie, and like right before she went, she said something like, "Can you tell me one more positive thing?" or something like that. I don't remember exactly what she said. And all I said is, "You're a stud. Get in there," or something, And she's like, "All right, thank you, Mark." And then she went in and she ended up winning. So like, I think like a little pat on the back, a little word of encouragement again before they go in there. But we definitely talk about how nerve wracking it is, and like they know. So it's good to have a really good routine to take your mind off of that type of stuff. So like, maybe like, oh, when I get in the call room, the first thing I'm going to do is put my spikes on, and then I'm going to see if they let me do a stride or two, if there's like a little runway under there that we can do it. So like the best thing you can do is have a routine and stick to it and take your mind off it, like at the Olympic trials, like I'm like, all right, we're not doing anything different on this warm up. We're doing everything the same. And then like at the Olympics, all right, Ellie, same warm up. We're not going to change anything. Let's do it the same, the best we can. And then, and then deal with it. So we talk about it, but I don't know what you do.
Yeah, I don't know either. I've never been there, and I don't think I ever will be.
Never
So
will
I'm
be.
hoping I'm living vicariously through you here. Speaking of, I hope, regardless of how it goes, success or failure by any measure, you'll come back on and tell us how it was, right? Like after you've experienced it, that'll be really cool to hear again from you again. And that's
Yeah.
my parting thought for now.
Absolutely, I'd love to come back on, and I really appreciate both of you too, and you Ross, you guys both do a lot for the sport, for endurance sports, whether it's the tour or sometimes I don't listen to all the rugby things that you talk about, but
We'll give you a pass. We'll give you a
yeah.
pass on that for now. For now,
But I love your show, and I think you guys are wonderful.
Thanks,
Mark,
Mark.
thanks. Yeah, thanks very much for your time and for your great insights, and best of luck in France. We'll certainly have a special interest in your athletes, and I will watch with a lot of enthusiasm. So I hope they do
Thank
well
you.
for you. I think.
See my T-shirt. See you in
See,
Paris.
there we go. It says New Balance. See you in Paris. We will see you in Paris. Wave because we're watching on television.
Thank you.
Good man. Good luck. I hope it goes well. Stay healthy. Well, let the athletes stay healthy too.
Exactly. Thanks, guys.
Good stuff. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers.
A minute. Let's just stop the recording.